Hey everyone, so today is going to be a fairly in-depth discussion with some graphics about MOUT, military operations in urban terrain, and the nuances entailed with that for a range of applications, military and otherwise, for citizens, civilians, private sector, all that stuff. It was brought up in a comment by user Shawarma992. So shout out to you. That was a great topic. So I'm going to do a video on it. So thank you for that. So first off, there's going to be two manuals that I recommend you pick up. You can openly download them from the internet. They are free. One of them is going to be ATP 3-06, and that is the U.S. Army's Urban Operations Manual 2022 edition. Again, you can find it online. The other one is MCRP 12-10B.1. That is the Marine Corps' MOUT manual, the relatively current version of it. So again, ATP 3-06, Army MOUT, and MCRP 12-10B.1 MOUT, Marine Corps MOUT. Okay, so those two manuals, you want a full spectrum doctrinal foundation of information to go off of. Those are the two manuals to get. Again, you just search up Army or Marine Corps MOUT manual in Google, and download links will pop up. Okay. Nothing classified about those. Those are publicly accessible manuals. Moving on from there, base fundamentals of military operations in urban terrain. Okay, so for civilian considerations and some private sector consideration, where you have limited logistics, limited supply, things like that, you don't have the massive support system of a military, right? So you need to understand, what kind of dynamics are you dealing with? You should be doing, obviously, as we've talked about many times, your advanced work, your advanced planning, your area studies for your urban environment. A lot of people live in cities, obviously. They're the most populated areas because they're cities. So you need to understand what the threats are. So you need to be doing your risk assessments. You need to be understanding what areas within this city region, this city template, are hotter areas, higher risk areas, which areas are more friendly to you, where you have network continuity, assistance continuity, community support, don't have it, all those things. Support logistics, urban environment provides a lot of resources in a non-natural resource way, right? You have your more conventional, typical resources, right? You've got medical centers, you've got places you can go to get goods and equipment, all these things, if things are functioning. If it's turned into, say, a serious situation where a large city like Idlib is basically completely rubble, and this goes for places in Iraq too, back during the GWAT and things like that, you're not going to have a lot of that, right? So you're going to have to bring stuff with you. So taking some of that into consideration, some of those major points and understandings about, hey, if you're in a city and you have to be there for whatever number of reasons, in these very varied kinds of situations, and there's a number of exigent situations that would prompt usage of MOUT operations and techniques. We won't get into those nuances per se. We're just kind of focusing on the topic of MOUT here. But getting you to understand, logistically at base, how are you going to be able to operate effectively in this environment? So points and questions to consider there, okay? And to think about and develop for yourself in your resource pool with your MAG and all these things, apart from in the professional application and capacity. Where's your QRF? Where's your quick reaction force? Where's your emergency response support, if you have any? Hopefully you do, right? So understanding all those logistical nuances, okay? So moving on from there, getting into a little bit more of the intricacies of MOUT itself. And this is while getting into intricacy, this is still a very general primer video, right? You need to go do your own research, do your studying, do your training, developing your package for yourself, and training with your people. There's a number of things to consider, okay? Besides conventional hybridized warfare, like what we're seeing in places like Ukraine and stuff right now, urban warfare is the most dangerous thing that you can be doing. It's the most dangerous place you can be in any type of asymmetrical or conventional warfare, right? You see that in Ukraine as well, and you've seen it all through the GWAT, and you see it a number of other places, right? So, you need to understand that, okay? So we're going to go through a couple of graphics here. Well, there will be some pauses. I'll have some graphics pop up here. Just basic high-tech FBI, graphical design here. Very basic MS Paint graphics, but it gets the point across, right? So, kind of starting with the aspect of hey, what are with the physical aspects of military operations in urban terrain. So your physical aspects, your terrain, it is a 360-degree battlefield, X, Y, and Z axes, right? Okay? The enemy has a say in the fight, and they are everywhere. Simple fact, okay? So, first graphic here that's going to pop up is your general threat points, okay? And just as general graphic, on one side is kind of a multi-business kind of large structure, maybe multiple floors. It's got multiple openings. It's got flat rooftop kind of thing. On the other side, there's some walled houses with entry points. The houses are multi-story. They have roofs as well. You've got alleyways to deal with and the road that you're on. Okay? Where are all the threat points? Think about it. They're everywhere, okay? Every doorway, every window, every rooftop, under every car, every alleyway, linear up and down the street, behind you and in front of you, okay? There are many vantage points that the enemy, again, has a say and can present a threat from, okay? So, your awareness, your situational awareness, and the overall skill package that your group of people are bringing to the table needs to be at its A game at all times in an urban environment. One little thing can go wrong and everything is going to fall apart. Murphy's Law. Okay, so first thing to consider here. Okay, so threat graphic, threat points, it's all marked just in this basic graphic. You kind of understand that. Next graphic here is a continuation of the threat points, and these are your fatal funnel points. Okay, so again, every doorway, every alleyway, every garage opening, all these things, along with your hallways, your stairwells, your focused restricted paths of travel, your thresholds and otherwise, and to include on roads. Roads are somewhat of a fatal funnel too, right? It could be a little bit easier, depending on the environment, it could be a little bit easier to navigate, whether on foot or mobile in vehicles, off of a road. But a road is still a fatal funnel to an extent too. But you have all these other fatal funnels everywhere around you. You have all these focus points of ambush and assault and attack that you need to be cognizant of and assessing at all times. And then when you say, for some reason, you decide, for whatever purpose, being an emergency or otherwise, that you have to do a dynamic entry into a building, and that's where there's a lot of videos out there on CQC, CQB, whatever you want to call it. It's part of MOUT as well. Doorways, fatal funnels. Hallways, fatal funnels. Stairwells, fatal funnels. Thresholds into every room, fatal funnel. Everything is a fatal funnel until you get out of that fatal funnel. And you have the reprieve of being in a room, or you get outside into a safe area, you get to a rooftop, whatever it is. there are multiple points of danger, multiple points of elevated risk dealing with this kind of environment and just going into a structure. Best doctrine, obviously, instead of having to go into a building, unless you have to go in to extract somebody, rescue someone, or whatever for QRF or otherwise, your best option is to destroy that building from the outside. Okay? We did this all through the GWAT, use our Bradleys to great effect. You know, the Marines had the LAVs, the Striker systems, you know, and then Humvees with MAU deuces, Mark 19s, or whatever, just level the frickin' place. You know, airstrike it. Obviously, with civilians, and in the civilian context, you don't have air support, typically, unless you're very well off and have some kind of air support. Very far and few between, at least here in the United States. So what are you going to do? You're going to probably have to burn it out. You're going to have to level it in some way, right? So again, with this graphic, all your fatal funnel points, okay? Something to consider here. Excuse me. Okay, so moving on from the risk assessment part and just understanding how dangerous and dynamic an urban environment is, okay, we're getting into some basic movement structure and understanding of dynamics for your teams of people. Now again, it depends on whether you're mounted in vehicles, mobile, or dismounted. You're on foot, okay? For these graphics, it's mostly just for the on-foot representation. With vehicles, it's obviously going to be very similar. You are somewhat restricted because your vehicles can only move in certain directions and in certain places. You know, it's not like they can just drive through a house, per se. So you're kind of relegated to roads and alleyways. You know what I'm saying. Okay, so when you're on foot, you actually have a little bit more dynamic movement than in a vehicle. In a vehicle, hopefully it's armored. If not, you're not going to want to be using them nearly as often in an urban environment because you are a soft target, you are a large soft target, and you're going to get lit up. Okay, we don't call them steel coffins for nothing. So with that, for dismounted aspects, okay, just some basic column structure of movement in an urban environment. So various types of columns. You've got your staggered column. You've got your standard linear column, or ranger file as you want to call it. Everyone is in a single row on one side of the street. Staggered column, you're on different sides of the street staggered, right? Just like the graphic shows here. And then with the ranger file, it's all single column. And then there's an aspect point on there for Overwatch. You're going to have another portion of the team trying to get access to an elevated position to provide cover fire and additional PID and support if you would have to engage something, wherever it is down the line, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to be a designated marksman or a sniper role per se. It could be a automatic rifleman role, or just standard rifleman, whatever you have in your group at your disposal that can get an advantage from an elevated position, right? So getting to that elevated position is a task within itself, okay? There's a series of different tasks with all this stuff. So then from there, so with all that, you're understanding, hey, what's the structure of your movement through the streets and things like that, and honestly, staggered column is better than a typical ranger file in the context of MOUT. Ranger file is better for in the woods, in a lot of ways for application there. And MOUT, it's a little bit different because when you have the staggered column, you have advantages of being able to cover each other and have better perspective and view of vantage in that 360-degree XYZ axis environment, right? So these are just some things to really take into consideration, and you do have to practice them. All the doctrinal information that's being put out here, and this baseline of understanding of nuances and things like that, only goes so far. You need to do some practice. You need to do some drilling. I know that can be difficult in an urban environment because there's always people around, and it may not necessarily be wise or advantageous to just be walking around with firearms and all that stuff. But you can do this stuff without a show of equipment and things like that. You can just practice walking down a street. In proper spacing. You should always keep several meters between everyone, right? You bunch up. That is a advantageous point of attack for any threats out there, right? You bunch up, you're all probably gonna get hit, right? Especially when you're in these open areas like in the street. So understanding that you need to keep proper spacing, and that staggering your column and stuff is going to be a little bit more advantageous because you can cover each other and just have better overall view of the dynamic environment that you're in. Okay, so there's just this kind of stuff to take into consideration. I've thrown a lot of information out here and with these graphics and stuff. So these are just some of the basics, but there's a lot of points that I've thrown out here that you need to take into consideration and get to developing a formula for yourself. You can take a little bit from those manuals that I mentioned at the beginning. Okay, there's a lot of great information in them. There really is. Okay, along with some of the other aspects and insight that I'm throwing out here, to be able to produce something for yourself, a training package of sorts that you can utilize to become more effective in an urban environment. With that being said, there are a lot of channels out there that talk about the CQB, CQC stuff. There's a number of people and organizations out there that are very good at that have a lot of knowledge and experience. Okay, there are also a lot of people out there that do not, and they're trying to pass it off as if they kind of know a little something about it when they don't, and that's very dangerous. When it comes to MOUT specifically, it's going to be law enforcement and military that have a lot of doctrinal training and warfighter training in these very dynamic and dangerous environments, where the information coming from is going to be a lot more useful and experience-backed in its efficacy. Okay, there are some people out there, they may be good shooters, but when they get into a realm where they're trying to talk about something that they don't know anything about and have never experienced, that's dangerous and can get people killed. So shame on those people. Aside from that, again, doctrinal information here, just a baseline fundamental understanding of what's going on with an urban environment. You need to do your area studies. You need to do your threat assessments. You need to go out and do scouting. You need to do drilling and practicing. There's a number of things that you need to do to improve, develop and improve for yourself with your overall skill set in your training packages and things like that in order to actually survive in this kind of environment. Because where you have large masses of people, the number of threats exponentially escalates. In tandem with just the heightened risk of such a dynamic environment being in an urban setting. Okay, so that's about what I have for this one. There's a lot of information I threw out here and a lot of just general baseline understanding, apart with some references to recommend to you. So that'll about round it up for this one. It's a very complex topic, and it could go into multiple videos. I'm not trying to get too whiteboard with it or anything like that. There are other people out there that do a good job of that. But this is good information, and this is the necessary kind of baseline fundamentals for people to understand, hey, there's a lot more to it than people understand and realize. They want to see all the high-speed, flashy, shooty shit, kicking indoors and everything. That's not going to get you very far in an urban environment if you can't handle being in that environment for an extended period of time and dealing with the massive number of threats and risks that you have to yourself at any given time, environmentally and with your adversaries. So there's a lot to it. Those are just two of the manuals. There are several other manuals out there that are good as well. But those two, again, fundamental stuff, and they're large manuals, so there's a lot of information in them. So that about rounds it up for this one. So thanks for watching. More stuff coming soon of all kinds. Metal up.